Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Shadows over Hemlock, a Felix Cross case file, by E.A. Copen, narrated by Travis Baldree. Chapter 1. Whoever said that possession was 9/10 of the law probably didn't mean demonic possession, but that didn't make him any less right. Judge Turney wiped sweat from his bright red forehead as he bent over one of his marble countertops across from me. They called him the Bulldog in legal circles. At first I'd assumed that had to do with his no-nonsense demeanor. He had a hell of a reputation in the courtroom. After watching him piss himself during a simple exorcism, and afterward pull out his checkbook with a trembling hand, I decided the nickname had come from the way his jowls hung. The whole tough-on-crime act was a facade. The judge clicked the end of his ballpoint pen and put it to the carbon paper in front of him. "How much did you say?" $250. He looked up from the checkbook. "For a prayer and a little water smeared on her forehead?" "No, that was the first 100, I clarified. The other 150 keeps it out of the papers." "What a scam," he mumbled, turning back to his checkbook. It wasn't like he couldn't afford it. His Lincoln Park home was worth a cool $500,000 easy, even in the current economy. With all the bribes he took, the backroom deals made, his investments, and his salary, $250 measly bucks was nothing. He just didn't like the idea of giving it to me. The cheap bastard was lucky I didn't slap a $50 asshole tax on the back of it. "Cash," I added, sticking my hands into the pockets of my oversized coat. "Unless the L-ticket machines are suddenly taking checks." Judge Turney glanced up from the check he'd been about to write, staring at me as if he doubted I was serious. When he finally figured out I was, he grunted, pulled a wallet from his back pocket, and carefully counted out the sum. I grabbed the fistful of 20s and carefully folded them over, jamming them into my jeans pocket. "Thanks." He said nothing but walked me to the back door and held it open for me. I guess I couldn't be seen coming and going through the front. What would the neighbors think of a grubby, unshaven stranger in a long coat coming and going in the middle of the night? I was probably bringing down the property value just by being there. Maybe that was a good thing. The median rent in Chicago was a bit high, if you asked me. Not that I wasted my money on housing. There were plenty of places to sleep in a city of almost 3 million. Icy wind brushed against the skin under my eyes, stinging like salt on a fresh wound. I made my way down the concrete steps. The wrought iron gate's hinges groaned as I pushed it open and stepped out onto the sidewalk. Darkened windows loomed like eyes in brick faces, peering down from behind the sleeping buds of buckthorn and green ash trees. Gray clung to scaly tree trunks, providing cracks for little green lines to crawl through. One day soon, those green threads would become vines and Bissell Street would come alive, green and welcoming. In late March, the budding trees did little more than cast lumpy shadows in the moonlight. Patches of dark ice clung to the shadows where it stayed just cold enough to keep them from melting. Smoke rose like dragon breath from dryer vents, car exhaust, and both my nostrils. My lungs seized with the first truly cold breath I took in the shadows. Breath exploded in a desperate cough that left me doubled over and dizzy. My lower back throbbed, reminding me I'd broken it in 2 places once before. Surgery had saved my legs, but the old scars hated the cold, and so did the bones. I spat onto the pavement and watched the dark spots spread as I wiped my chin clean. Damn it, I needed to spend winter and spring somewhere warmer. It was a 15-minute walk to Fullerton Station, and I spent every step cursing my stupid decision to take the judge's case. If I hadn't been so desperate for cash, I wouldn't have answered when I got the call. I knew I should have charged him more, but I was always worried if I asked for too much, they'd report me to the church. I wasn't technically authorized to perform exorcisms, but then a real exorcist couldn't do the job for less than $3,000, let alone 300, if they showed up to do the work. $250 would buy me a few trips on the subway, a warm meal, and a bus ticket out of Chicago. Maybe I'd go to South Birmingham. It was warm in the South. Before I hit the subway, I ducked into a convenience store where I bought 2 packs of Marlboros, a candy bar, and a newspaper. The kid behind the counter stood on his tiptoes to reach the cigarettes on the high shelf behind him. "You should switch to vaping. It's better for you." I tossed a lighter into the mix and slapped a 20 onto the counter. "I don't smoke because I care about my health, kid." Fullerton Station was closest, but I felt like a walk, so I skipped it in favor of wandering the streets. Walking after a job was a habit, almost as addictive as the nicotine I inhaled as I did it. I had to do something to clear my head. Every case was different, but difficult. Even the judge's wife hadn't been an easy one. Every demon I cast out was one less of the devil's soldiers on earth, but I didn't do it because I was altruistic. I didn't even do it for the money, though I'd take what I could get. I suppose it was my penance for the one soul I couldn't save all those years ago. I stopped on the side of a bridge with cars rushing by behind me. A steel cage stood between me and the option of a 50-foot drop into traffic. I took the stub of a cigarette from between my teeth and shoved it through the grate, watching as it crashed into the pavement, only to be crushed by blind progress. After 2 cars, there wasn't much at all left of the once bright red spot. My fingers curled through the holes and I leaned against it, pondering the fall. Suicide was a cardinal sin. I wondered if that was the only reason I hadn't considered it lately. Jesus, I really have hit rock bottom, haven't I? I sighed and pushed myself away from the grate, limping to the nearby stairs. They led to a small area beside the highway, a walking tunnel covered in graffiti. Noise echoed through the tunnel, the muffled sound of a struggle. I looked up. 3 guys were pulling on a woman, mocking her with kissing gestures, groping her while she struggled to get away. "I said stop it, Chris!" She yanked her arm free from one of them and managed to get a few steps before another stuck his foot out and tripped her. All 3 laughed. "Walk away, Felix." I closed my eyes and turned my head. "Don't get involved. It's not your problem. It's her fault for hanging out with assholes like that." The weight of an invisible hand settled on my shoulder. "Do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it's in your power to help, Felix. Proverbs." Damn it, Sean. 10 years gone and still lecturing me. "Stop it!" the woman shouted. I sighed and turned back, fingers curling into fists. "Hey, assholes." The 3 guys froze. Apparently they hadn't noticed me before. One of the many gifts I'd honed over the years was being virtually invisible if I didn't want to be noticed, but now they were looking right at me. "Leave the lady alone," I said. One guy grinned. "We were just having some fun, weren't we, sweetheart?" She leaned away. "Doesn't look like she agrees with you." The biggest of the 3 broke away from the pack to scowl down at me. "She ain't your concern. Move on, asshole, before I teach you a lesson." His guys circled me. I met the woman's eyes. She shook her head and mouthed, "Just go." Too late for that. She said to leave her alone. The first punch hit me in the back, just above the lowest scar. Red and white lightning flickered behind my eyes, and I folded, paralyzed by the flash of pain. Tiny pebbles and wet newspaper that stunk of cat piss lined the bottom of the tunnel. I curled myself up against it, hugging my ribs with one hand and shielding my face with the other. Tennis shoes crashed into my shoulder, ground against my cheek, and snapped against my legs. Fists struck my fingers, the back of my head. Every blow blurred together, becoming a rhythm of pain. Hands yanked my shoes away, dove inside my pockets, turned out everything I owned onto the pavement. The worst part wasn't the beating. It was the sympathetic look on the girl's face as they did it. She knew what it was like to be where I was, and she'd know that feeling again. For all my trouble, I hadn't made one bit of difference in how her life was going to turn out. I was as helpless as she was when all was said and done. They beat me, robbed me, and left me lying in that cat-piss tunnel without ever having uttered more than an expletive or 2. The big guy grabbed her by the arm and hauled her away with a warning to shut her mouth and walk faster, or else. I thought it was all over until she yanked free and ran back to me. She fell to her knees, lifted my chin so she could look me in the eyes. "Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." She pulled away, letting my head fall. It wasn't until she left that I realized she'd pressed one of the crumpled 20s back into my palm. I stared at the money, watching little red dots appear. "You're bleeding," Sean's ghost whispered. "Get up." My body moved on its own, staggering up on 2 legs. Somehow I limped out of the tunnel, but that was as far as I got before the dizziness made me fall on the side of the road. I don't know how long I lay there before a car pulled to a stop next to me. I expected some good Samaritan. Instead, a man in black leaned over me. "Well," said the man in black, "you're a fine mess, Felix Cross." I closed my eyes. "Go away, Xavier." "It's Bishop Xavier, or Your Excellency, and not this time. Get in the car, Felix." I sat up, my head swimming. The coppery taste of blood filled my mouth. I spat it away from the bishop. "Come on now." He hooked his hands under my arms and half-dragged me back to the waiting limousine, shoving me in the back. We were moving before I could even process what was going on. Bishop Xavier held out a white handkerchief. "Pinch your nose and lean forward. You're getting blood on the upholstery." I did as he instructed. Xavier sighed and crossed his arms. Like most clergy, Xavier had a grandfatherly look to him. His neatly trimmed white hair sat beneath a red cap, and his black frock bore the red trim of his office. A large cross hung around his neck, and a big brass ring adorned his finger. He looked like a helpless old man, but I knew him to be as shrewd and ruthless as they came. "What happened, Felix? Who did you pick a fight with this time?" "No one. Not that you'll believe me." I shifted my grip on the handkerchief. "Keep squeezing." "I am, goddammit." The bishop shook his head. "Don't do that here, Felix. You won't take his name in vain, not while I'm here." I closed my eyes and took a few breaths through my mouth. The air still held a coppery taste. "How'd you find me?" "The Lord works in mysterious ways, doesn't he?" Xavier smirked. "It was the judge, wasn't it?" I loosened my grip on the handkerchief and chanced raising my head. Xavier shrugged. "I did speak with Judge Turney an hour or so ago. I believe the word extortionist was used in the same sentence as your name." "I charged him $250. You tell me the church could have done it cheaper." I balled up the handkerchief in my fist. "Absolutely not," said the bishop. "Nor would the church have gotten involved at all. Attorneys are Protestant. It just so happens that the judge and I are golfing partners." "Figures." I crossed my arms and leaned back against the seat. Xavier and I weren't friends, but I knew him from my seminary days. He used to teach courses like advanced demonology and angelic interpretation. Sean and I had been his star pupils 10 years ago, before Sean went to hell and I let my life fall apart. Since then, the church and I maintained an uneasy peace. They didn't bother me, and in return, I didn't expose the conspiracies and lies for what they were. The bishop opened a small compartment in the car next to him and offered me a cigarette and a lighter. It wasn't my brand, I could tell that much by how it looked, but he'd gone through all the trouble of securing a peace offering. I wasn't going to refuse it. I seized the cigarette with shaky fingers and bent over, lighting it. The first rush of nicotine was always the best, better than sex. I caught him staring at me with that smug smile on his face, and sighed. "What do you want, Xavier? You wouldn't have picked me up if you didn't want something." "I have a case that might interest you." I shook my head and flicked the ash into the divot in the door handle. "I don't work for you, the church, or any organized religion. I thought I made that clear when the Jesuits approached me." "I'm not offering to hire you as an official liaison for the church, simply as an independent contractor, which you have already been for almost a decade now. You can bill me hourly if you want." He tugged a manila folder from where it had been tucked next to his seat and held it out to me. I turned away without taking it. "Sorry, not interested." "But you haven't even read the case file yet." "I don't need to. I know what's in it. Some bullshit the church wants to cover up and lie to the public about, or some problem you can't deal with openly. That's why you're offering it to me instead of one of your exorcists." You can't do anything about this officially, whatever it is. Giving the case to me gives you plausible deniability." Xavier frowned. "I've been keeping tabs on you, Felix. Berlin, Dubai, Bombay, Shanghai, Tokyo. You've been around the world, studying under some of the world's most respected philosophers and theologians in a variety of religions. You've sought out every demonologist or expert on hell from here to Siberia. That makes you the world's foremost expert on demons. Yet you have no permanent address. You drift from place to place, sleeping in gutters, drifting your way to your next meal regularly." I shrugged. "So? I know what you're after, Felix. You want to bring him back." I took a long drag on the cigarette and let the smoke out slowly, staring out the window at the passing lights, saying nothing. Xavier put a hand on my shoulder. "Shawnee's gone, Felix. I know how it feels to lose someone you care so deeply about. After all this time, after what you did, you want to bring him up now and pretend you care?" I turned my head, glaring at his hand on my shoulder. "I've dealt with enough demons to know when I'm being emotionally manipulated. No offense, Your Excellency, but fuck you." The bishop withdrew his hand to flip open the file. "Does the name Raina Hemlock ring any bells?" "No. Should it?" I thought a moment, realizing the name seemed familiar somehow. "Wait a minute. She was that rich girl who disappeared. They thought the parents killed her but could never prove it. The investigation should have ruined the father's career in politics, but somehow wound up catapulting him up in the polls. Well, she's no longer missing." He turned a page, pretending to examine the papers in the folder. "A young woman about the right age turned up about 2 years ago at the Hemlock estate, claiming to be Raina." "The Anastasia grift," I said. "It was one of the oldest in the book, and one of the most difficult to pull off in the modern day thanks to DNA and dental records. It was named for the supposedly unaccounted-for Princess Anastasia of Russia. Several girls were put forward with people pretending to have housed the escaped princess. If they'd pulled off the scam, they stood to inherit wealth, fame, and a royal title. Sadly, the real Anastasia was dead, and Raina Hemlock likely was too." "That doesn't seem to be the case. DNA confirms a match." He held the file out to me again. This time, I took it, flipping through the notes. "What does this have to do with demons?" "Well, Raina seems to have lost her memory. They put her through some controversial therapies in an attempt to help her recover those lost memories, all of which are detailed in there. Long story short, though, while in an altered state, Raina claimed she'd gone to, and subsequently returned from, hell." I found the page in the file holding a drawing Raina had made while in her allegedly altered state and lifted it into the passing streetlights. "Do you know what this is?" Xavier shrugged. "I couldn't make anything of it." "It's an inverted map of hell. The sulfur lake, the fiery pits, it's all there. It's just a mirror image." I turned the page around, marveling at the level of detail. It was a crude drawing, but there was no mistaking it. She'd even labeled the locations of interest, and in ancient Aramaic, no less. Backward. Short of scouring some of the world's most ancient and sacred texts, as I had, there was no way this Raina girl could have reproduced the map. I flipped the file closed and lowered it into my lap. "Where?" "Where what?" He raised an eyebrow. "Where is she?" Xavier sprouted one of his smug grins. "First things first. Let's get you cleaned up and dressed in something that doesn't reek of cat urine." Chapter 2. The bishop took me to the downtown Hyatt and put me in a room for the night. He had a full staff follow me to my room. They shuffled through the door, bringing in luggage I didn't own, placing it in a pile on the floor near the simple closet. He told me I could have anything in those bags without any obligation, but that I'd have to sign some paperwork before I took the job officially. I sat at the table across from Bishop Xavier and a chubby church lawyer with glasses too small for his face, only half listening to his legalese. Whatever they shoved at me, I signed it. It didn't matter what sort of gag order the job came with. The pay didn't even matter to me, and neither did the benefits, though I'm sure whatever cookie Xavier offered was generous. For the first time in 10 long years, I had a lead that might bring Sean back. It could be a false lead, and it was still more than I'd ever had. All those years, trekking the globe in search of knowledge and secrets, had brought me no closer to freeing Sean from hell than I had been the day I lost him. But this girl might hold the key. If not, if everything she said turned out to be a lie, I wanted to be the one to expose her. I hadn't even met Raina yet, and already I both loved and hated her for opening a wound she alone could close again. So I signed away the life I had and accepted the one offered by the bishop. All it took was a signature, 3 initials, and 2 handshakes. 10 long years of work culminated in an hour of bureaucratic bullshit. The lawyer, the bishop, and all their staff members picked up their documents and left me alone in a strange room with a stranger's luggage. I stood in the center of a pyramid of black bags, numb and exhausted. It was too much to deal with so late, so I dragged myself to the shower instead. In the pristine bathroom, I carefully stripped off my coat, folded it, and laid it over the back of the toilet before standing in front of the mirror. The face that stared back at me was thin and withered, with a splotchy, unkempt beard and messy, ashen hair. Blood had crusted in both nostrils and stained my cheeks. I had swollen, dark eyes, but not from the beating. That was from lack of sleep. The shirt I wore had been white once, but it was a sweat and blood-stained rusty yellow now. I glanced over at the coat. I'd been so careful with my things. The coat was a treasure on the street, and so were decent shoes. Few people had warm clothes, so I felt lucky. Now that I was safely behind walls and the relative comfort of a hotel room, I could see the coat was torn in places, missing buttons, and stained up. It was a revolting, second-hand bit of clothing. How could I ever have thought I was lucky to have it? How could I have ever let myself fall so low? "Fuck this," I snarled, and gripped the shirt by the collar. It tore off my body in scraps that I let fall to the floor. My disgusting socks went in the trash, along with the torn jeans and the underwear I'd had as far back as I could remember. I'd had the money to dress better, to eat better, to live better, but I'd squandered it on other things. On drink, on bus tickets, on cigarettes and junk food, on back-alley blowjobs and horse races and cockfights. Anything and everything that would distract me, make me feel less alone. At first, after losing Sean, I poured myself into my work. That was the part everyone knew about, my travel days. I clung to the hope that knowledge would be my salvation, but all it brought was more misery, the aching, damnable need to learn more. I was always one book away from the answers I needed. The missing piece was out there, I was sure of it. Until I wasn't. I turned my back on theology, philosophy, science, and hope, grasping for anything and everything as I fell. I'd spent the last 2 years flirting with one addiction after another, but I had yet to find a drug that could replace Sean. In the bathroom of that hotel, I stripped, shaved, clipped, and scrubbed it all away, rinsing the last of that version of Felix Cross down the drain. What remained was still thin and haggard, but less broken. I was too world-weary to get back the hopeful glint I'd once had in my eyes, but I could put forward the image of a man with a future, at least. A man who wanted answers and wouldn't let mundane things like life, death, and eternal souls get in the way. That part of me couldn't die. I needed that part of the man I'd become as sure as I needed breath in my lungs. In a few short hours, I shed my skin and left the bathroom to stand naked in my hotel room with my luggage and my Casefile. The first suitcase I opened held a black button-up shirt, the same sort that priests wore. I'd worn the same shirt for years during seminary, and had once hoped to add a standard white-tabbed collar to it. Despite what I'd once believed, the boring life of a priest had never truly suited me, but the black did. I put on the shirt and the familiar black slacks that went with it. Tucked into the front of the suitcase, I found another gift from the bishop, a pair of black leather driving gloves. I ran my hands over the material with a frown. Xavier was one of the few people who knew about my gift, or curse, depending on how you looked at it. Gloves went a long way to shutting parts of it down, but not all. Still, it was a thoughtful addition, one I appreciated more than anything else. Like riding a bike, I mused, standing in front of the mirror. Dressed the part, I finally took the Hemlock girl's case file and laid all the pages out on the bed before stepping back. The way I'd arranged the pages, it was impossible to read through it and make sense of anything, though the images were still easily visible. I picked up the picture of 8-year-old Raina. In the school photo, she looked like every other little girl her age, dressed up in her white button-down shirt and dark green pleated skirt. She'd worn a sweater for picture day. It was the same color as her skirt, but bore the monogrammed letters R.H. The curls and fat cheeks of early childhood had faded, leaving her thin-faced and dark-haired, but that wasn't what caught my eye. It was the smile. You can tell a lot about a kid from the way they smile, or don't. Raina wore hers like a frequent burden, as if she'd been practicing that smile for weeks on end. It could be like every other false smile for every other school photo, or it could mean something deeply troubling. Children were natural smilers. That it should be such a chore for Raina might mean she'd had a sadder childhood than most. I put the photo down and picked up another, this one of the woman who claimed to be Raina. The resemblance was there in the sad eyes, the dark hair, and the curve of her nose, but this Raina wasn't smiling. She glared at the camera as if she could set it on fire with her gaze. Her hair fell limply over her shoulders, pooling on a pale and bony chest. She was thin as a matchstick and wore a dress of faded pink, which only seemed to make her look paler. I remembered her case from the news. To remember a news story after 15 years might have seemed like I paid a lot of attention to it, but I hadn't. Reporters droned on about the Hemlock family all summer, and tabloids dogged them for years. What happened to Raina May? You couldn't stand in a grocery checkout line without seeing that headline for years afterward. Shady publications came up with many stories about what had happened to the wealthy senator's disappeared daughter, turning her into a satanic sacrifice during the Satanic Panic days, or claiming she'd been kidnapped by aliens when ancient aliens were all the rage. As long as Raina May sold, they'd milk every buck they could. The bored masses loved nothing more than a good scandal. Facts in the case of Raina's disappearance, however, were few and far between, as I found in her case file. The mother, Laura, put Raina to bed at 8 the night before and went to a campaign fundraiser with her husband. The girl was left with her nanny, who verified Raina was safe and in bed as late as midnight. By the time the parents came back at 2, Raina was gone. No signs of a struggle, no signs of a break-in. It was as if she'd simply gotten up and walked out. Search parties combed the Kentucky woods near the senator's summer residence for 2 weeks before they gave up. All they ever found was a single ballet flat caked in mud, size 1. It might have been Raina's, but DNA was inconclusive. I rearranged the pages, closed my eyes, and ran my fingers over them. Words lifted from the pages, floating in the air like whispers. They were nonsensical, meaningless sound to my ears, crashing against me like waves of smoke. I flinched with each strike, but didn't waver. It wasn't the words I needed from the file. Anyone could glean clues and facts from files. If Father X wanted just another detective, they wouldn't have sought me out. One whispered word grew louder, rising like a drumbeat from where it was buried deep inside the file. Eglobelam. The word meant nothing in the languages I'd studied. Not Latin, Aramaic, Arabic, Hebrew, or Greek. Not anything. Yet the word rose so loud, pounding at the inside of my head, it had to mean something. My fingers closed around a page, and my eyes snapped open. I lifted the page I'd grabbed and frowned at another sketch. This one was yet another map of hell, but based on Dante Alighieri's Inferno. Dante's work had been largely allegorical for the political climate of his day, calling out powerful people in politics and the church he didn't like. His accounting of the geography of hell wasn't at all accurate, but it still had its place in the study. Raina's depiction, like her other map, had been drawn flipped, all the writing and images backward so that it'd only be readable in a mirror. I took the map to the bathroom mirror and held it up. There you are, you little...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?